Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation to come and speak today. I should start by saying I'm not an architect, and actually I'm not even an engineer. Sorry. I'm an environmental scientist who's done a planning degree and an MBA, and at the beginning of my career I started work as a paramedic for the ambulance service and as a community regeneration officer for a very poor community in the north of England. I've seen firsthand what poor Baukultur does to people who live in poor areas, and it is that that drives me to do what I do today. And it is that that motivates me on a daily basis to try and help people create better environments and better design standards. So I should do the commercial first of all. I'm working for the Construction Industry Council, and that numbers about 500,000 individuals within its numbers and 25,000 firms of construction consultants. It represents most of the big institutes in the UK in the built environment industry. They are the custodians of the DQI, the Design Quality Indicator tool, which was developed about 20 years ago to ensure that quality was considered alongside cost and speed of delivery. It's an interesting tool. It gives many different stakeholders the opportunity to come together on equal terms, to discuss and to decide what the quality requirements for a project should be, whether that's a refurbishment, whether it's a new building, whether it's a master plan. And it ensures that everybody gets their say. Importantly, in a fast-moving process often, it provides a defined process and place for discussions about quality, so it doesn't get lost. The benefits that we are told, because there have not been great university studies yet, although that's something we want to look at, but the benefits that are reported to us include that the client and the stakeholders get a lot more information about quality than they'd thought about before they were taking part in the DQI. It helps us to produce a much better brief for the project, and the multiple perspectives are very good for reducing siloed thinking, and it gives the design team a lot of detail about why people want a particular element of quality to be considered. It's also, there are arguments. It's quite exciting sitting in a DQI workshop. We encourage it. We encourage people to discuss and to have open differences of opinion, because it's really important that the architect's not left to decide what the right answer is in a darkened room with a bag of ice on their head. It's much more important that those that are going to use the building or use the development argue it out and come to a point of positive consensus, aided by the independent facilitator. The reason that clients like this tool is because it's an open audit trail of decision making and the design intent, so we get consistency all the way through the project. And the National Health Service really like it because they see risk reduction. They see that things don't get missed because the right people are in the room together at the right time. It gives the board of a local health authority assurance that there has been a proper independent appraisal. Just to talk you quickly through how the tool works, I hope. Yes. There are 5 stages. There is an inherent weakness in the tool in that some clients only do 2 or 3 of the stages, but ideally we would do all 5. The briefing stage, right at the start, what do we want to do with this building? The early design stage for planning, what do we think the design is going to look like? How does it meet the needs and expectations we set out at the briefing? We've then got the develop to design for the construction phase, so what the construction company are going to work with. When the development is ready to be occupied, what do we think of it then? Are there more tweaks needed before people move in? And that's a really useful stage, because when people move into the building, if they've been part of the DQI, they know what to expect. It's much, much easier for them, in English we would say, to hit the ground running. They understand what the building's going to be like. They have a map in their head. It's easier for them to adapt when they move in. And finally, post-occupancy evaluation, the in-use DQI, once the building is in use. What have we learned? Does it work? What's not so good? What do we need to fix? The briefing stage, I think, is the most important, and the DQI does this very well. All of the stakeholders debate and agree their aspirations for the projects, and we help them create the brief by working them through the design quality indicators. There's just under 200 of them. It's done quite quickly, and the facilitator documents their consensus as to what the project should achieve, and that goes into a briefing record, and that contributes to the project design brief. So quality is an agenda item in its own right. And the briefing record becomes a benchmark against which we can evaluate the evolving design at different stages through the process. So a question: quality for who? And this is a really important question. We could do it for the regulators, we could do it for the ladies and gentlemen who are doing the design work, we could do it so that it stands up properly for the engineer, we could do it for the contractor so they make the right money, we could do it for the finance provider, we could do it for the owner who's going to sell it on. But what happens to the person who's going to occupy the building? If we're talking about a hospital, what happens to the guy who's got to clean the floors at the end of the day? What happens as regards infection control? What does the cardiologist think? What does the nursing sister think? We work very, very hard to get all the right stakeholders into the room for DQI. We also think about the neighbours, which is important for Streetscape, of course, and we think about the planet. Someone has to stand for the planet. We need to have the right quality indicators for that. So talking about the indicators themselves, the architects in the room will recognise this guy. This is Vitruvius, and he is the father of architecture. And it is arguable that people tend to go in and think about quality only from their own perspective and what's in their own heads. So we want to help them, and Vitruvius tried to do the same. He came up with 3 categories of indicators: firmitas, venustas, utilitas, with apologies to any proper Latin speakers, I'm sure my accent's terrible. But we draw from this to create the set of design quality indicators. But we've got slightly more user-friendly terminology. So we think about functionality, and we think about the arrangement and the quantity and the interrelationship of the spaces, and how the building might be useful. The build quality: is it safe? Will it stand up? How do we maintain it? What are the engineering systems like? And then the impact of the building itself, and that's on the people that use it, but also on the people who surround it, who walk past it, who live next to it. So we think very much about that. Now, the indicators were developed about 20 years ago through research and collaboration between academics, regulators, and different parts of the industry, and with clients too. And over the years, slightly different sets have arisen for slightly different applications. So we have a set for health, we have a set for education, and then we have a general set that can be used for any application. These are the indicators that are related to Streetscape. Don't worry if you don't understand them too much. I just wanted to prove that we do think about Streetscape. So in general terms, these ones are thinking about urban and social integration, form and materials, and about character and innovation. We encourage the developers and the clients to think about who they might involve in the decisions around this type of indicator. We particularly like to see people involving people from outside the project team. So we have everybody go through these indicators. And what they then do is say what level of quality is appropriate for each indicator. So for some, just comply with the regulations. Do the minimum that's acceptable. For some, we'd like a slightly higher standard, please. Those are important to us. For some, inspire us. Show us how high you can go. This is a terribly important facet of quality for this project, so we can really push people to do well. And some really aren't applicable. There are some things that you can't do in particular projects. Because this is going into the brief, it's really important that we sometimes provide information as to why a quality criteria is important. Why have we chosen this indicator? So we give plenty of opportunity to make detailed notes on what stakeholders are saying. Because we see this as really important when someone's working in a dark, not smoky room anymore, but in a dark room somewhere well away from the project. Why is this important? Why do we want you to put this in our building? So we do all this at the briefing stage. And then in the subsequent stages, we ask the people the stakeholders who are coming to the workshops, we say to them, here is a presentation. And we have the technical staff give a presentation in terms that they can understand. And we say to them, how does it feel? If we go through your quality brief, Is it performing as you expected it to, as you want it to? And we can do this right through to the construction drawings. We then go into prior occupation and in occupation, when people can use their experience of what they can see and touch and smell, because we can walk them around the building as it's going forward. Once we're into the in-use stage, we're asking people, how does it feel for you? So it's a fairly straightforward qualitative measure of how people feel about the building or the development that they're working on. It's not rocket science. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. This is not rocket science. And we present the results something like this, so that everyone can see them. How is the development doing against each category of design quality indicators? We can also check whether there are particular groups who feel that it's not doing as well as other groups do. So if the janitor, the cleaner, feels that it's not performing particularly well in one set of indicators and everyone else think it's good, why? What questions do we need to ask? What have we missed? What can we go back to? It's very, very useful for that. It's also useful for showing the funders, if there's usually there's somebody with the money involved, to show them that they're getting what they expect. It's roughly on track. And we can see, of course, where more work is needed. This is just an opportunity to show you some of the questions around access, because again, we're asking people to think sometimes from perspectives that are not their own. So we're talking about cyclists, we're talking about public transport, we're talking about car parking, but we're also talking about goods that are delivered to the place. It's great, isn't it? I can go home. We've done it. Fantastic. Except it isn't. That's the first half of the story. I now want to give you the second half of the story. The NHS is using this tool extensively, and they use the findings to inform their technical documents and their requirements for new buildings. It was used a lot in schools a few years back, and we see it being used for some offices. There was a tool for spaces, but that's been largely forgotten. Very few people use it now. And in fact, private developers don't use this very much at all, which we think is a serious problem. Because if we start to look at how our buildings perform, in terms of carbon, we're still predicting that a building will be 34% more efficient in carbon than it actually is when you build it. In housing, in building houses, the insurers of new homes paid out nearly 85 million pounds in claims for poor workmanship and problems in new houses in 2017. 51% of new homeowners are experiencing serious problems with their homes. In 2016, in schools in Scotland, part of a school fell down. This was because they hadn't put wall ties in. This is not rocket science. And the independent inquiry said that the defects were due to poor workmanship, a lack of site supervision, and a lack of proper scrutiny of the work by the client. We haven't got this right. And appallingly, absolutely appallingly, in 2017, this is the Grenfell Tower disaster. There is no other word for this. This was because refurbishment work didn't comply with building regulations. 72 people were killed. They couldn't get out of this building. The refurbishment work didn't comply with building regulations, basic stuff. The windows were designed inappropriately. They allowed fire to spread. The design safety strategy for the building, when it was put together 20 or so years before, was not remembered. Nobody knew why certain things had been done. There was an architectural statement on the roof, which was made of a flammable material, which allowed the fire to spread. The damning review at the bottom from Hackett is something which should be etched on every UK building professional's mind every day. A race to the bottom, ignorance, indifference. There is insufficient focus on delivering the best quality building possible. This is impossible, and this situation can't continue. And the UK industry has agreed that that is the case. And the Construction Industry Council, for whom I'm working, has brought all these institutes and organisations together to try and tackle this. And we think we can repurpose and reinvigorate the DQI to do so. So we started off by having a roadshow around the UK. We went to visit lots of different locations, and we said to them, okay, where does quality drain away? And they said to us, well, it starts at the brief. If you've got a rubbish brief, you can't expect people to do the right thing. If there isn't enough budget for your requirements, of course people are going to cut costs later on. They need to make their money. We have terrible communication across all the different people involved in delivering a building or delivering a development. And when the team changes, it falls apart. We disguise cost cutting as value engineering, and it is not value engineering. And we've got this lack of knowledge as to why something is important, like fire barriers. 3 weeks ago, an architect I was standing next to took a call from a builder who said, do I need this fire protection between these two houses, or is this an architectural conceit? How do you answer a question like that? We have this lack of skill. We still have a problem with our site workers not knowing how to put something together properly, and we have a lack of care. None of this can be addressed by one part of the building industry on its own. This is a systems issue, and we have to do this together. We've got this problem where cost and time are preeminent to quality, and we have to fix that. We need to get back to the triangle of the three things. Whoops, can I go back? I can. We also need to go back to this false idea that saving money saves money, because it doesn't, and I can assure you of that. Ask the insurers. The costs simply get pushed somewhere else in the project. The costs are usually greater than if they'd been dealt with at the beginning of a project. And the indirect costs are huge. Look at Grenfell as an example. Or look at a master plan which doesn't support active travel, and the costs of obesity and the costs of ill health. Much, much greater than the cost of doing the design right the first time. So we're taking action. We know that we need to broaden the scope of the DQI, and we see the indicators being broadened to tackle these things you can see up here. Safety, climate change and carbon wasn't really a concern 20 years ago. Health and well-being, a very strong issue to tackle at the moment. Technologies, how can we use smart technologies and otherwise for communicating and for monitoring? Particularly for quantitative monitoring of building performance in operation. We can do that without inconveniencing anybody. And there may be more, we don't have all the answers yet. We're also trying to help people get their budgets right at the briefing stage, rather than sort of deciding that what we'd really like is fairyland for £4.06. We're going to try and help people properly understand what quality costs. So either you get a bigger budget, or you trim your project, but no more of this pretense that you can have something on the cheap, which is good. We have to get accurate costing in. The Construction Leadership Council are doing work with government at the moment on that to try and help get that right, and it's worth a look if anyone's interested. We also have to work out how we get the owner or the funder or the developer to take on a wider quality brief. Too many people still think about, I need this, I need it within my red line, I'm only interested in how quickly I can let it. I'm only interested in how much it's going to cost. So we need to look at the levers that we have for this, which probably are around regulation, policy and consent. We want to see more external scrutiny. We have independent design review of key projects, for example, the major North-South rail project in the UK at the moment. We think there might be positive motivations, legacy, landmark, prizes, rivalry, and we may have to award a quality mark or a badge for following a quality process. The guy at the bottom is a UK politician, and he is saying that at the moment developers get poor quality schemes through, and that's not going to happen any longer. Developers who try to do that will find the door shut in their face at the planning stage. UK politicians don't have a long track record of staying in post right now, so we'll see what happens. We also have to work on this golden thread of quality. This is really important, and one of the recommendations from the Grenfell report was that we need this golden thread. You need to write down what your strategy is, your design strategy, your safety strategy, and the rest of the stuff, and it needs to be widely understood. So we need to record what we're looking for in the quality brief, and we need to make sure people can revisit it. And in 20 years' time, when they want to sort out a block of apartments like you saw at Grenfell, they need to remember what the fire strategy was and the quality strategy was. We might be able to use BIM to help us with that. We don't know yet. There are different forms of contracting being tried in the UK at the moment, and some of those are around sharing insurance between everybody in the project, rather than everybody carrying their own. And there are some around design for performance, where the performance required is set out at the beginning. And if you don't hit it, you don't get consent for the building to stay, you have to fix it at your own cost. So that will be an interesting one. We may also work with the RIBA, the British architects, and the chartered surveyors in the UK. They have a tool called a quality tracker, which is looking at key risk areas in a project. We may decide to check that those are being properly mitigated. What we have to be careful of, I'm not sure the dancing houses would always be approved of by a citizens' jury, but they're rather nice where they are in Prague. The citizens' jury might like better the picture on the right, which is actually the street I grew up on. And it's not too bad, but we need to make sure we can allow for innovation and new work as well, and that will require some education of people that we're working with the stakeholders that we're working with. We also need to think about how we look after the maintenance and upkeep of public realm. The point that was being made earlier about the amount of public realm which is more now private. What do we do with public realm, genuinely public realm? Who looks after it? And how do we ensure that quality checking doesn't just become a tick box? Done that, done that, done that, don't have to think about it. We can't have that. There's another job to be done that this tool can't do, and that's around education. And the UK government is working hard on that with a new national design guide, which I think you will find covers many of the topics of Baukultur that we've been talking about today. And they're trying to help people better understand what good design is, which is interesting because 10 years ago they took this out of the planning regime because they decided it was slowing down new development too much. So the circle completes, it's back in again. And then when the building is occupied, how can it be that every building is an experiment and we never know whether it worked or not? We do have to go back and look and see whether it works as expected. We do have to go back and see what people's experience of it is. And we're actually quite good at doing it in buildings, but I'm not aware of very much work on post-occupancy evaluation of spaces and of streetscapes. And I'd be really interested to see how that might be done more. And that's something that we want to have a look at, probably with the Design Council. And what can we learn from retail? Since I arrived in Geneva, I have had 5 emails from Expedia asking me how my hotel is. They're very interested. I've given a lot of feedback. I was never asked about my new house, and I've never been asked about my workplace, which seems a bit strange. So my concluding thoughts. There is a quality imperative. Baukultur has a direct impact on lives, whether it's critical, like Grenfell, or whether it's children who can't play outside, young adults who've got nowhere to go and their lives are blighted. This is imperative. It does have to be a systemic approach. We can't do it by tackling one party in the building life cycle. We do have to look at the whole built environment life cycle. DQI is a good tool. It is good, or I wouldn't be working on it. But we can't have a tool on its own unless people want to use it. We have to work hard on getting people to want to use something which makes their projects better. And I think that's going to be done by looking at funders and owners so they want to use it, so that the supply chain follows suit. This is reliance on compliance has not achieved policy. Telling people what to do and just expecting them to do it is not delivering the buildings and the public realm that we need. I'm a strong advocate for collaboration, for shared outcomes and performance-focused goals, for checkpoints and responsibilities, and for realistic briefs and budgets. We probably also need to look at contracts and insurance too. And then finally, the organisations I'm working with to do this project really do think this is a real opportunity to tackle the quality issue in the UK built environment. I would say that we don't yet have all the answers, but I think we do know what the right questions are now. Thank you for your attention. The website's there. Please watch this space. Thank you.